With 2024 winding down and 2025 right around the corner, it's time we revisit the beginning of ZenlessZoneZero and update what every player in ZenlessZoneZero needs to be doing right now. Today, I have 10 topics that are extremely important for everyone to know, but if you're someone who's just started because of Miyabi or 1.4, listen carefully, there's a lot of details that you might have missed. Let's get into it. When you start ZenlessZoneZero for the first time, you'll be greeted with a quick tutorial on combat. It's not bad, but here are a few things you probably missed about Zenless's award-winning gameplay. Every character has health, attack, defense, crit rate, and crit damage, and these are typical stats that you're probably familiar with in video games as a whole. However, there are some new stats that might confuse you. Impact refers to how quickly or effectively you can apply daze and eventually stun enemies. Pen ratio tracks how much of a target's defense you ignore. Energy regen, well, is in regards to how quickly you regenerate energy, which can be used to enhance your special attacks. But then we have two anomaly stats. Before we can even talk about these two stats though, we need to actually address what anomalies are. I'll try to summarize the concept of anomaly quickly, but in case you're already familiar with this, feel free to move to the next section. Anomalies are a debuff that every character in the game can apply. If you're familiar with the element system of games like Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves, or Honkai Star Rail, this will make more sense in a moment. Anomalies are associated with their own specific element, and when you start applying elements consistently against an enemy, it fills up this circular bar. This is known as an anomaly meter and will trigger a specific effect when it fills entirely. Anomalies are very important for all players to understand, especially now since it appears as though Zenless is currently undergoing a massive anomaly meta where almost all anomaly-based characters top the charts in power. I'll leave a chart on screen now specifically detailing what each anomaly effect is paired with a particular element or attribute, but before we get back to anomaly mastery and proficiency, we need to talk about disorder. Disorder is a kind of anomaly effect, but it has a special requirement to be activated. Disorder on its own is an effect that deals extra damage based on the anomaly applied, but in addition to this damage, it also applies daze, which is extremely powerful, especially when you're fighting against enemies that are very mobile. The way disorder works, however, is as follows. When you apply one specific attribute anomaly for the first time, it can be overwritten or replaced to then activate disorder. This means that if you fill the anomaly meter of an enemy with one element, but then refill it again with a separate attribute soon after, the powerful disorder damage will then be triggered. To be clear though, this does remove the first anomaly effect that was applied to an enemy. So if you, for example, applied shock and then filled the anomaly meter with fire, shock would then disappear and burn would stay on the enemy after a disorder proc is activated. But by now you're probably wondering what this has to do with anomaly proficiency and anomaly mastery, aka our last two stats. Well, let me explain. Anomaly proficiency, plain and simple, is the stat that affects the damage and power of anomalies applied by your agent. Anomaly mastery, by contrast, is what controls how quickly these anomalies can be applied against an enemy. So now that we've gotten past the basics of combat, let's talk about story and stages in general. Although not all of these will be unlocked at the start of ZenlessZoneZero, 3 kinds of modes are available in the story/HDD. This is where a majority of the early, one-time/story content will be available, and each of these is important to clear. Story, combat, and exploration have different functions and rewards tied to each of their completions, but overall you can expect polychromes for pulls or character resources as potential clear rewards. But as of 1.4, the exploration mode has now been streamlined so that TVs, which a lot of players were formerly not happy with, are now completely optional or just outright removed. In place of them is now a less clunky and more explorative experience with Bangboos, which to be honest is pretty cool. As a reminder, completing all of this is very helpful if you're aiming to pull the newest banner unit, or if you're trying to build your first team to beat ZenlessZoneZero with, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. In chronological order, after experiencing combat and then being introduced to the story, we should then talk about stamina, or in other words, the daily energy system in ZenlessZoneZero. This is actually a resource that you can't affect or use until a certain point in the story, but make no mistake, this is pretty important. Stamina is how you farm out gear/relics for your characters, and it's also how you obtain their ascension or upgrade materials too. In terms of priority for what you should or shouldn't be farming for, here's a general guideline. Farming for materials that will upgrade the level of your agent and then their W engine are critical, and this is because doing so provides agents with stat increases, while also allowing you to upgrade agents' core passives. Core passives, on the other hand, are very important for gameplay since they usually come with stats and decent improvements to the strengths of your agents. But following this, disc drives are then pretty important too, since they give you tons of damage and stats as well. Before we go any further into disk drives though, we need to talk about dailies. Dailies in ZenlessZoneZero are thankfully and also graciously the fastest that I've ever seen in any gacha game. Although you have a couple options here in how you choose to complete the daily activity bar, I personally open the store, scratch off a lottery ticket while visiting Best Boy, and finally get a cup of coffee to increase my energy while completing my daily completion bar. This yields you 60 polychromes, which is roughly a third of a pull every day, but hey, this is pretty fast. The generic weekly activity in ZenlessZoneZero has also been changed to now give rewards that include polychromes, dennies, and a new currency that lets you customize your room, and these don't take too long either. Notorious Hunt is another activity that's unlocked later in the story, but don't be mistaken, this is very important to complete each week. Normally, you are given access to 3 runs of this weekly activity, and these are used to upgrade the core passives of your agents. Now, this is going to look similar to the weekly material requirement for characters that other gacha games have, but what's special about Zenless specifically is that you can actually toggle this switch here and use your stamina to farm more than the 3 runs that you typically get every week. This is amazing for upgrading agents and also makes the character building process feel less gated or restricted. Now with these polychromes you can do a lot, like refresh your energy, or what all of you are probably here to actually do, which is pull for new agents. On that note, let's talk about agents and the gacha system in ZenlessZoneZero. Like most other gachas in the space, Zenless's pulling system revolves around 50/50s and 75/25s. Pulling for an agent on a rate-up banner has a 50% chance of yielding you the character showcased, and the same can be said about the rate-up W engine banners, but this time with a 75% chance instead. If you don't receive the character listed on the banner that you're pulling for, do keep in mind that the next one you'll pull for will then be guaranteed. In case you're curious, any pulls on limited agent banners will then be carried over to future banners, and this is the same case for W engines. As a final note, there are 2 numbers that you should keep in mind when pulling in ZenlessZoneZero, and the first is 90. That's the most attempts it'll take for you to get an S-rank character on a banner, and the second is 75. After 75 tries, your chances of getting an S-rank start to increase considerably. However, keep in mind that this 75 number refers to soft pity, and technically speaking, Zenless has never officially confirmed its existence, though it seems to be in the game. Now let's talk about W engines. These affect your agents greatly because of the stats and benefits attached to them, but of course, some W engines are attached to gacha. These are typically the S-rank limited W engines that are associated with new characters, but there is some good news. With the gadget store in ZenlessZoneZero, a few A-rank W engines can be purchased and actually perform pretty well too. This, alongside the current trend of Zenless releasing event W engines for free, does make things easier for players, but keep in mind that some W engines are simply insane value and outperform any competitors by a long shot. I'm looking at you, Miyabi's W engine. Now let's backpedal to disk drives. These are very important for character building as they are the gear and RNG rolling aspect of the game. There are a few things you should know about disk drives. Each set has a 4 and 2-piece set effect, similar to that of Honkai Star Rail, but what's most important to know here is that the 4-piece effect of sets are extremely valuable. Some effects range from increasing how fast you can apply anomalies to increasing your stats like attack or crit damage by a significant amount. Overall, these effects are not worth overlooking, which is actually in contrast at times to the 2-piece effect. Although being efficient and having a 4 and 2-piece set effect on a character is ideal, it is worth noting that the 2-piece set effect on most disk drives is only worth roughly 3 or 4 substat rolls. What this means for the average player is that if you have a strong individual disk drive that doesn't complete a 2-piece effect, don't be alarmed. The 2-piece effect is valuable at all times, yes, but if you have an amazing disk drive otherwise that doesn't have a home, it can definitely be worth using until you find the perfect replacement. The final note I have for disk drives is actually in regards to farming for them. Although disk drives are unlocked around your 30s in terms of level, there are a few things to consider before farming for them. First and foremost, level 35 is when you unlock S-rank disk drives, which are the highest tier. 45 is when you are then guaranteed 2 S-rank disk drives per clear, and 50 is the final level that affects your disk drive drop rate, with this allowing you the chance to gain an additional 3rd disk drive with your already guaranteed 2. Side note, these changes in drop rate and rewards per level are also present when farming character materials, so keep that in mind when choosing what to spend your stamina on. Now it's time we talk about one of the strongest selling points in ZenlessZoneZero. That's right, it's the Bangboos. Interestingly, these mascots have taken over the world with how much people love them and honestly how cute they are. But let's talk about pulling them and their impact on gameplay. Regarding gacha, this is the pure free-to-play you can't buy any more pulls system that was originally advertised, and I have good news here too. From my experience with the pulling system in general, and despite being unlucky with pretty much all of my Bangboo pulls, I was actually able to pull for a lot of the S-rank Bangboos. At the time of this writing, I have 7 of the total 11 S-rank Bangboos, and I still have 159 left over. To be clear, I also haven't min-maxed every activity or even every event/shop to purchase as many Bangboo pull tickets as possible. Another very interesting tidbit here is that unlike with the W engine or even the agent banners, pulling for a Bangboo is guaranteed and you can't lose your 50-50 or a 75-25 to another Bangboo. But that leads us then to their impact. I'll probably go further into this with a separate video, but to be straightforward, Bangboos don't actually do much in terms of combat. Now before you start typing and arguing in the comment section, hear me out. ZenlessZoneZero already requires you to mix and match certain agents to fulfill certain synergies for a special effect. This usually increases agent stats by a decent amount and actually shows quite a difference in performance, but by comparison, Bangboos will sometimes require you to do the same, while the impact that these synergies have often not really giving you nearly or even a similar effect. Some of these effects are things like increased anomaly buildup on Bangboo chain attack, or something like increased Bangboo chain attack damage when fewer enemies are in combat with you. However, these honestly aren't that amazing in general, and trying to pull for a new Bangboo entirely just for these effects can actually be worse than better. But for an explanation on this while keeping things short, Bangboo chain attacks can sometimes hinder your experience and take up too much time in combat. This makes most of the passive or non-chain attack related Bangboo quite valuable. And this is also why Bangboos like Nightboo, Avocaboo, and Tower, I'm gonna just call it Avocado Boo by the way, and even Boo Rusher can actually be powerful compared to its peers. At the end of the day though, I would personally still recommend pulling for the Bangboo that appeals to you the most or that you think is coolest. Now it's time we finally talk about the more endgame modes in ZenlessZoneZero. These either repeat or get updated regularly with new content, and before anything else, these should be your #1 priority to complete as they have the most polychromes and pulls/overall rewards attached to them. The content in these modes are certainly the most difficult as well, but as mentioned previously, they are certainly worth completing. Let's summarize each one now. Hollow Zero technically has 2 modes with varying missions and gameplay styles within them, and this includes a story mission or a more explorative experience for both the Lost Void and Withered Domain. But then Zenless also has 3 specific modes within the Hollow Zero that are more boss focused. This includes Inferno Reap, which is a score-based fight against Nineveh, Battlefront Purge, which is essentially simulated universe from Honkai Star Rail, or the Elusive Realm from Wuthering Waves, and this is Zenless's own spin on a roguelike mode that allows you to power up and get creative with your agents for weekly rewards. Finally, the last mode that we have is Withering Garden, which is a similar mode to Battlefront Purge, but this time it features Nineveh as a boss at the end instead. To be clear, completing either Battlefront Purge or Lost Void weekly will yield you polychromes and other materials, but each mode also has its own respective set of achievements and objectives that you'll need to clear if you want all potential achievements and valuables. Shiyu Defense and Deadly Assault are the bi-weekly modes that alternate, and each has its own gameplay style. Shiyu Defense is more of a time trial oriented, with beating enemies within a certain time being the objective, but Deadly Assault is more score focused, with beating up 3 bosses with 3 separate teams and Bangboos being the goal. The final mode that was recently introduced to ZenlessZoneZero is the Battle Tower. This is an infinitely scaling game mode where the rewards technically end at level 55, but the best rewards really end at level 30 with an exclusive icon that basically just says, yeah, I'm him. Overall, all these game modes provide a lot of content when available, but do know that they also require decent investment in characters as well as a solid understanding of gameplay mechanics. If everything I just said wasn't enough in terms of free pulls, content to complete, or anything in between, I still haven't talked about what I consider to be one of the best parts about ZenlessZoneZero. It's actually their events. Now, while ZenlessZoneZero doesn't necessarily have a 10 out of 10 event every time that it releases a new one, there is something absolutely crazy about there being a new event without fail almost every single week. One day you'll be making sandwiches for Sokaku or Ellen, and the next thing you know, you'll be playing Bloons Tower Defense 6 or even Arknights. This does feel nice too, just because the polychromes and overall resource management that you gain from each of these activities is skewed towards the character that's currently on banner. These events, in combination with patches being pretty generous in terms of polychromes and pulls, means that every 0.1, 0.2, or even 0.3 patches has thus far basically shown to provide almost 80 or 90 pulls which is honestly kind of a lot. That's going to be it for today's guide though, guys. If you are just starting out or just playing ZenlessZoneZero, I hope you're enjoying and I hope you're having a lovely time. Hope you guys learned or took something from today's video. As always, if you'd like to ask questions, you can find me live on twitch.tv/Kana with 4 A's at the end. But guys, if you haven't already, make sure to leave a like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. Thanks again for watching. Make sure to check out the rest of my socials. I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.